Are you ready to be a published author with a successful book launch that doesn't require a ton of travel? Get the inside scoop on today's Innovator interview with Jennifer Lee. Welcome to Lipstick Unplugged. This is your no-gloss business branding show that gives women the confidence, mentoring, and resources that they need to change their lives and the world through entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Dee Copeland-Patience, and today we have Jennifer Lee. And Jennifer Lee is the creator of the Right Brain Business Plan. I first heard her interview on Blogcast FM, and I was just really fascinated by her. I used the word fascinate a whole bunch of times in this interview. But what we talked about is we kind of went behind the scenes of the launch of her Right Brain Business Plan book. She did some really creative things, and I wanted to dive right into that. She also talked about how, as an introvert, that she decompresses after a launch, because I was just interested in that, as well as some new challenges that she's looking forward to in this next year that kind of took me by surprise. I think you're going to enjoy this one, and I'll see you on the other side. All right, so we're here today with Jennifer Lee, and she is a certified coach, author, artist, and yogini, and she believes in living life in full color. So I thought that she'd be great for the show, and I wanted to welcome you, Jennifer.
Hi, Dee. Thanks for having me.
So what I was fascinated about, we were just talking, I was telling you that I only want to interview a handful of folks. I don't have the energy, maybe it's just that my introvert side, but I don't have the energy to get to know the whole internet. And there's certain people that I'm just, just fascinated by, and you're one of them. And so cool. I wanted to introduce you to my audience, because what fascinated me first, when I first got to know you, it was through your interview with Blogcast FM. And you created the Right Brain Business Plan. And you're in a kind of a position that I'm in, which you were, at least for a while, where you're working full time somewhere else. And there's this creativity that organically came out of you. And you created this I think it's just a remarkable product that the world just didn't know it was coming at all. And I really wanted to talk to you about that Right Brain Business Plan and how you really grew the audience for it. Because I have a strategy that I call the Rebel Brand Strategy, and I want to build a following for that. So how did you do it, and how can an audience do something similar to that?
Mm-hmm. It's funny that you said the world didn't know. I forget the wording you used, but I didn't know it was happening either. So I had no idea that was coming down the pike. So anyway.
And that's what I think is interesting. So one of the things I try not to do is repeat what's in a whole bunch of other interviews. You already have some great interviews that talked about the development of the Right Brain Business Plan and how you were working somewhere else and it came along. One of the things that I didn't get so far from reading all about you was I love to know what you were like as a child, like where you grew up. What was your life like? What are your parents and your family like?
Okay. You might have to feed me the questions again, because I am an introvert too, so I don't suffer from verbal diarrhea. So let's see. I wish I might be able to go find a picture of me
Go get it,
in pigtails. I'll get it in a second. I think I have it. So I grew up in LA, actually in the San Gabriel Valley, in a city called Montebello, which no one really knows of. Let's see. I have a brother who's about almost 10 years older than me. And so I grew up kind of like having three parents, basically. Overprotective big brother and two parents. And then out of all my cousins, on both sides, I'm pretty much the youngest. And then I do have a younger cousin who's about almost 10 years younger than me. So for a long stretch, I was the youngest of the youngest all across the family. So I think, growing up, I was pretty quiet. I still am, but that whole, that role of being the youngest definitely was a big theme for me. My parents, let's see, my dad was an electrical engineer? I don't know. He was in the defense industry. He didn't really talk about what he did, right? I think some of it was maybe some top secret government stuff. I don't know.
Wow.
And my mom worked for USC. University of Southern California in the film department as an administrative assistant. So actually, my dad, when he was in the defense industry, like in the 80s, there were all of these layoffs and cutbacks. So he ended up taking early retirement and he actually pursued his passion of cooking. So, kind of later on in life, he realized, well, he loves to eat. And then he realized he loved to cook too. So, it was cool to see him make that transition of, being in this corporate job that he didn't really enjoy. I mean, he would come home from work exhausted and tired and grumpy and like, don't talk to dad, when he comes home from work. But when he made that shift to then follow his passion around cooking, it was cool to kind of see that. That was probably the first time where I saw someone in my family really start to follow their passion. So that was pretty cool. Yeah.
So do you think, so when you were growing up, did you know that, because some of us, our families expect us to be doctors or lawyers or certain things. And I know that one of the big parts of your story that people love is that you were working as a consultant in corporate America for 10 years before you just decided you developed your coaching business on the side and then you make the leap. So before that, before you made the leap and you were working, why did you take that path, or what were the decisions that you made to take that path to corporate America in the first place?
Oh, because I had to be a good girl, right? I had to get the good grades, go to good school. So I definitely had that. I don't think it was, directly instilled in me. Like my parents were never like, you need to be a doctor or a lawyer. I certainly had friends whose parents, made them do all these extracurricular stuff and really intense pressure. But I think underlying there was always this undercurrent of like, do a good job, do the right thing. And then I personally had, wanted to be a lawyer because I loved the show LA Law. I may be dating myself here. So I did want to be a lawyer and I wanted to be a news anchor. So, growing up, it was kind of those titles or roles that we know of, right? I didn't realize like, oh, I could actually make my own thing up. So yeah, I think in terms of following the path that I did, it was the whole idea of, getting the good grades, getting into a good school. And then when I was in grad school, I found out about consulting. And so that was at USC where I went to grad school. And that was really my first time where I started to learn the power of networking and connecting with people. And I got introduced to lots of great, inspiring women who were older and more experienced than me in the professional world. And they kind of took me under their wing and taught me about consulting. And so intellectually, it was like really intriguing to me, inspiring. And I'm really glad that I took the path that I did. I learned a lot. And along the way, I learned it wasn't where my true heart's desire was.
Yeah, and so that's where a lot of people, I think they just find that they're unhappy and they're doing something that they're good at, but they're not quite happy. But I can't just go run off and be a cook, and you talked about that in some of your interviews, how you decided to take that slow path to entrepreneurship. You decided to move from to having your business on the side. Why did you make that decision instead of just going for it?
Oh, I was too scared, for sure. I didn't know what that would entail. There weren't a lot of, actually, my dad's parents were actually entrepreneurs. So my grandfather owned a photography shop in Chinatown in LA. Really, that was like the only entrepreneur kind of thing in my family. And I think my dad probably rebelled against that, and went into his job. And then for myself, in terms of knowing when to make the leap, it became just unbearable for me to be at the corporate job, and I knew it was sucking the life out of me. But it was scary to even think of leaving. So let's see, in 2003, that was when I first started taking my coach training. And I thought, oh, this would be cool, like to maybe do someday. And I, started taking on clients on the side. It took me about 3 years to actually finally say, okay, I'm ready, let's do this.
Yep, and you made that leap.
Yeah.
And
but
so
truly, it was because I waited so long that it was really painful to be where I was.
Well, see, and that's one other, like sometimes people say, I just have to do this thing and they're pulled towards it, and other times they're pushed towards it. And that's what that illustrates to me.
Yeah.
And so how do you describe to your family what you do now? Because you do a lot of coaching and it's online, right? And so how do you describe to other people? Well, what do you do?
Yeah, it's a tough question, especially describing it to my family. I say that I help creative entrepreneurs build and grow their businesses in an authentic and creative way.
Cool. And
Yeah.
so is that a part of, is that artisan coaching? Or I wanted to like take a step back and then say, okay, you have artisan coaching and then you have the right brain business plan, because we all have like these different ideas. And I feel like I have this web show, but I have this brand strategy that's maybe bigger or different than the web show. So when we have all these different ideas, how do you sort through it, or how are you set up right now?
That's a great question. I think it's always evolving. So Artisan Coaching is kind of the overall brand, and that came to be probably back in, I think, 2007 or 2008. I worked with a branding consultant on that. I'm definitely feeling like I'm outgrowing it, and I know that there's some work for me to do around that. I don't know quite what it is, but I know it's also not just right brain business plan. I know there's much more that I'm offering that's even, outside of business and just pure creative inspiration and resources. So, kind of right now, the idea is Artisan Coaching is the overall brand. So I've got things like my Unfolding Your Life Vision licensing program and products. I've got some intuitive painting stuff. And then Right Brain Business Plan kind of took on a life of its own with this whole idea of helping creative entrepreneurs using this visual process.
And so how are you, I know that you have some coach licensing, like you're moving beyond just Jennifer teaching other people. You decided at some point in your business to also maybe have classes, and you're doing Create Live. And I wanted to know, so why did you decide to go that route instead of just writing a book, there it is, and I'm going to continue coaching people? It seems as if you're really stepping it up.
Definitely stepping it up. And it's because the universe is asking that of me, right? It's like I'm listening to where people are wanting more help and support, and I'm just one person, right? I can't help everyone, especially can't help them one-on-one. So certainly growing the business through different avenues of being able to help people. So having, the book obviously is a great way for people to just get exposed to the concepts, but then having, a home study program, and then people or a course where I used to facilitate it. Now I've experimented with having some of my facilitators try out facilitating the course through me, and then after people have done the program, they're like, oh, I really want to take my clients through this, and so I started listening to that. And back in 2011, that's when I launched the licensing program for Right Brain Business Plan, so that people who wanted to take this work out could lead workshops in person, do this one-on-one with their clients. And, we talked about I'm an introvert, right? I'm also highly sensitive. I don't like to travel a lot.
Me neither.
Yeah. So I would get requests like, oh, are you going to come to Europe and lead this? I'm like, oh, well, now I could say, we've got facilitators in Europe, but, you can contact them and get to work with them in person. And so it's great to know that the work can be, out there touching people, inspiring people, and I don't have to be the one, holding everything together. I mean, obviously, I'm playing an active role, and it's near and dear to my heart. And now I have creative cohorts around the world who are helping to spread the message and share the love. So there's more to give for everyone.
And I like that. And so one of the things I wanted to do is really take a deep dive either into the launch. Like, for instance, I know you're doing Create Live, and I think that's with Right Brain Business Plan, though. So what is like your most favorite launch? And can you take us through kind of the peaks and the valleys of how you got an idea off the ground to where you just finally put it out to the world?
Goodness. Well, yeah, I think the thing you're talking about is it's through Creative Live.
Creative Live.
Yeah, and that was a live workshop that I did with 6 in-person folks in the studio, and then it was broadcasted to thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of people.
Wow.
Yeah, but I think in terms of thinking about a launch, probably talking about the book launch and the video summit would be full of lots of rich, juicy information. So,
all right.
Yeah. So maybe ask me the question again now that I have the...
All right. So now that you have it, what I want to do is you have an idea. You had the idea that you have the book launch, and you have, you talked about, I think you had an event. So you're talking to a woman who's at the same place. She says, I have this thing that I want to launch. I have this idea. Where do you start? How did you start mapping that, especially since you're kind of more of a right brain person?
So with the book launch, I knew that I needed to do something, like something special to let the world know about it, to get people excited. I also said I don't like to travel, so the standard, book tour thing just wasn't up my alley. I actually was working with my mentor. I had hired her specifically because I knew, like, oh my gosh, next year is going to be pretty huge with this book launch. So I think the first thing is to find support. Don't try and figure it out on your own. And as part of that, I was part of a mastermind group. And in brainstorming, I thought I might do a virtual event. And they're like, Jen, your work is so visual, you need to be on video. So getting feedback from other people about what your gifts are and what you would naturally be good at, I think that certainly helped me realize, like, oh, I have an opportunity to do video. And no one at that time had really done a lot of video summit kind of things. It was still telesummits, and I think that's still fairly the case. So I was kind of going into new territory. So, if you're finding that yourself in that situation, maybe even with a telesummit, you've never done that before, find people who can help you. So I hired, a technical guy who understood live streaming and all of that and helped me, put together what needs to happen technically to make it work. But the whole idea of, coming up with the event, I think it's really about connecting back with what's important to you, what's the message that you want to share, what are people going to get out of it, what's the value that you add, and building that into whatever you're providing. And so this whole idea of, being creative and embracing your right brainness in business was the theme. And so Right Brainers in Business Video Summit was how it came to be. And in terms of planning for it, obviously you can see behind me, I've got my sticky note project plan, and I certainly, mapped out, when it was going to happen, the 10 days it was going to happen, backed into, how do I find the speakers? How do I, make sure I've got the site set up? So kind of doing the visual project planning was very helpful for me. So kind of getting those ideas on paper, mapping it out, doing mind maps, and then making sure you've got your dates and all the left brain details and logistics squared away as well, because certainly doing larger launches like that, there's a lot that's involved for sure.
So tell us what it was like. So it sounds like you had speakers. Did you do kind of was it an online event, or was that a live streaming event as well?
So it was an online event. I think I had 11 guest experts, and I recorded those ahead of time, but broadcasted them live during 10 days so that I was on video talking about the book, talking about certain concepts, and each day was about a chapter in the book. So I use that as the structure. So it's helpful if you can, find some kind of structure to use for your event. And then that's how I found the speakers. And they were about, the sessions in total were 45 minutes. The interviews were maybe 20 minutes. So there was a lot of time for teeing up the conversation, talking about, if the topic was marketing or finances, we'd get to, have a dialogue, with all the hundreds of people participating live in the chat room. And then after listening to the speaker, sometimes the speakers would actually be in chat responding as well. And if not, I'd be there kind of putting in my 2 cents. So definitely a lot of interactivity, engagement. And for me, that was something that was really important because I was really jaded with a lot of these events that's just a recording and hello, Bueller, is anyone out there listening? Part of, what excites me is being in connection and seeing the light bulb moments that happen from the exchange, even in the people in the chat, not necessarily from me, but that connection that happens. So that was something that was important.
Really cool. Wow, that's creative. So you break down, if we have a course or a book that we're marketing, break it down into chapters, have like a speaker each day. You pre-recorded some interviews, but then you have that interaction, and I imagine, were you using Twitter or Instagram or Facebook as well?
Yes, and in terms of the chat, that was built in with we used WebEx the first year, and then I've been using Livestream um, last year, and I'll use it again this year. So that's for the all the chat action happens.
Yeah, and I noticed that, and so I thought, so is that, so pretty much that helped you launch the book. And did you do any follow up or anything after that? Or, because I imagine you grew your list with the people that attended that as well, too, right?
Exactly, right. So it's, having the guest speakers and having them help promote is a great way to build the list. And certainly my list grew from that. And also just doing like guest posts and lots of interviews. So, yeah, during the whole book launch phase, I was certainly doing a lot of talking, getting up early in the morning and getting on radio shows and all sorts of things. So it wasn't just that event, there were all sorts of other things, kind of happening around it. But that certainly was a pillar of, getting the book out there.
So tell us about some times, because I know that I opened my site, I launched a site, I did a soft launch, and then I want to do a launch for iTunes. And everyone always says it will never go perfectly. So did your launch, I mean, did it go pretty close to perfect, or were there just some disasters, or what was it like that you think that is maybe some lessons that you learned?
Gosh, it's kind of a blur. I don't have kids, but some people forget, like, I don't remember childbirth. That's perhaps a little bit of that. It went pretty smoothly. I would say last year I did have kind of a little snafu, and it was mostly just, miscommunication. And so I had announced something that was actually incorrect information and set people's expectations really high, and then had to be like, sorry, we misunderstood.
Oh,
I have to
no.
retract that. And that was unfortunate timing because there was just such great momentum that had built, and some people were disappointed, other people were like, oh my god, like, no worries. And I was very transparent about what happened and did like a message over the weekend, and people were actually even more connected to me after that happened. So instead of going, oh crap, we messed up and going to hide, really dealing with it head on, and letting people know what happened and reaching out to my mentor, and we actually came up with an even cooler solution that made people really happy. So you turn lemons into lemonade,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
And so with one of the things I find interesting about you is I find that on the interviews, it's amazing how the person's personality come out. And I wouldn't necessarily have pegged you as an introvert, and I know a lot of times it really has to do more with your energy. But what are your challenges you think, either as an introvert or as maybe a right brain thinker, that you've been tackling lately, something that you've been trying to get out of your comfort zone with?
I would say certainly getting myself out there is a challenge. I mean, I can do it, certainly. And I know I fool some people. They're like, really? You're an introvert? I'm like, totally. On the Myers-Briggs assessment. And when I used to be in corporate, we would do these exercises and like kind of line up about who's the most introverted. And I'd be like, I need to go outside the room. I don't even fit in this line. So, giving myself that time to recover is really important. Like having led this intense 3-day workshop through Creative Live, certainly, this is, my first interview since I've gotten back, and I'm like, oh gosh, I have to get dolled up again. So even just basic things like that are a challenge. But giving myself just recovery time, I think is important. So that kind of continued putting myself out there and not retreating and going to hide. Certainly after the book launch 2 years ago, I had probably 2 or 3 months where I'm like, I can't deal with this at all.
Wow.
Go away, stop asking me questions. I don't know what's next. Leave me alone. you know?
Yeah, because everyone wants to know, well, what's next? What are you up to next? And I'm going to
Yeah.
ask that question, by the way, in this interview.
Yeah, and it's okay. Yeah, that was really hard for me then. So I think that's another growing place for me in terms of kind of that being able to recover more quickly. So putting myself out there in a big way and then taking care of myself, but then being able to be present again and showing up. So
Yeah.
yeah, and I think that just takes practice, quite honestly.
It's helped me so far. And I know one of the challenges that I had is with me working full time and then I'm doing the show and doing the starting the business on the side. I noticed that you have a team also. I hired some assistants. So I wanted to ask too, as part of that energy recovery, I noticed that I'm depleted less when I have an assistant do some of this stuff for me, especially when things are crazy. So can you talk a little bit about your team, how you chose them, and what they do for you?
Totally. You're smart for hiring someone even before you're doing this full time. I applaud you.
I had to, or else I might not be married pretty soon. It's like I'm driving my husband crazy.
Right? Yeah. It took me, let's see, I quit my job in 2006. I probably didn't hire my first assistant until 2010. So I kind of handled things on my own for quite some time. I think I tried out an intern um, a little bit, but yeah, it took me that long. And I've actually gone through different assistants. Most recently I had hired kind of more of an agency, like a bigger kind of group, thinking like, oh, I'm growing a lot. I need all this support, and actually became more complicated than it needed to be. And I went back to, actually asked somebody locally, kind of a friend who, like, I just really like this person. I think her skill set is really good for what I'm looking for. And so I went on a limb and tried something new and approached her like, hey, out of the blue, want to talk to me about working with me? She's like, great. And it's been working out really cool. I never would have thought I'd go that route because I'm always like, oh, an assistant, I need to find, a virtual assistant and online and all that stuff, when really it was somebody kind of in my backyard, so to speak.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I think it's about finding the right people, having the right connections, knowing clearly what you want help with. So I talk in the book about creating a helping hands wish list and just brain dumping all the things you want help on, then writing out the characteristics of the people. So I also have a bookkeeper, an accountant, a graphic designer, lawyer, coach, mentor. What else? Those are the top ones that come to mind.
It's always scary to me because a lot of folks online, when they talk about the top people, they talk about lawyers. And I'm thinking, what do I not know about needing a lawyer with this? But no,
Yeah,
I had a business lawyer too.
what? You have a lawyer too?
Yeah, just someone to do the different businessy stuff. But is that what you use a lawyer for, or is there something I'm not aware of?
No, things like for contracts.
Okay.
Yeah, probably the first time, I think perhaps the first time I hired one was for looking over the book contract. So usually it's around agreements, contracts, things like that. And then when I created my licensing program, I was the one creating the agreement. So, working with a lawyer to put that together.
Well, good. And so wrapping up here, I wanted to talk about, not necessarily, sometimes I find that I don't have to find out, people don't have necessarily this big next thing that they want to do. Sometimes it's just decompressing over what you just did. And so I wanted to ask, though, for you to tell the audience maybe what you have coming up that you're excited about, or what are you doing this year? We talk about bold goals and those types of things that we're challenging our businesses and ourselves with. So what would be your bold goal or something that you're really challenging yourself with?
If we were to be bold, I would say, considering doing a second book.
Ooh.
Yeah. And the thought of doing that while maintaining my current kind of business environment and even, wanting to go for more, increasing the financial goals significantly. Thinking of doing both is kind of mind-boggling to me, because when I wrote the book, first book, it was like, oh, I can't take any more clients, like, I need to just buckle down and write. And I'm not in that kind of place anymore. There's so much more responsibility and people who, are counting on me for stuff. So the idea of balancing both and like exceeding my financial goals even more, that's a lot to hold, and it's exciting. And I actually think it's possible, which I wouldn't have thought maybe even last year. So we shall see.
Very cool. So where can we find you, your coaching? Where do you want to send people to find out more about you and what you have going on online?
Right. Probably for your audience, rightbrainbusinessplan.com would be the best place to find out more information. And then on Twitter, I'm at Artizen Coaching, Artizen Coaching. And on Instagram, I'm Jen Lee, JENNLEE. This is what happens when you have a common name. You can't grab your name in all the places.
Well, we would definitely look you up. We'll link that up in the show notes. And I just wanted to thank you for your time. I'm so glad I got a chance to talk to you. And I'm just going to wish you luck with everything you have going on in this next year.
Great. Thank you so much, Dee. It's been a pleasure.
All right. That's it for today's Innovator interview. I hope you enjoyed the show. For more inspiring mentor interviews, the show notes, and your Rebel Action worksheet, visit lipstickunplug.com.